A Song of Ice and Fire is widely regarded as author George R.R. Martin's magnum opus, and it all begins with the first book he published, A Game of Thrones. Many believe that A Song of Ice and Fire and the resulting HBO series not only revolutionized television, but the fantasy genre as a whole. And it all begins with this that I have in my hands, and we're going to be reading it. Mainly for my friends. If you do not know me and you have stumbled across this, I hope you enjoy. If you do know me and you don't know why I'm reading this, don't worry about it. And if you do know me and you know exactly why I'm reading this, I hope you enjoy especially. Prologue. Page 1, of course. We should start back, Garrett urged as the woods began to grow dark around them. The wildlings are dead. Do the dead frighten you? Sir Waymar Royce asked with just the hint of a smile. Garrett did not rise to the bait. He was an old man, past 50, and he had seen the lordlings come and go. Dead is dead, he said. We have no business with the dead. Are they dead? Royce asked softly. What proof have we? Will saw them, Garrett said. If he says they are dead, that's proof enough for me. Will had known they would drag him into the quarrel sooner or later. He wished it had been later rather than sooner. My mother told me that dead men sing no songs, he put in. My wet nurse said the same thing, Will, Royce replied. Never believe anything you hear at a woman's tit. There are things to be learned even from the dead. His voice echoed too loud in the twilit forest. We have a long ride before us, Garrett pointed out. 8 days, maybe 9, and night is falling. Sir Waymar Royce glanced at the sky with disinterest. It does that every day about this time. Are you unmanned by the dark, Garrett? Will could see the tightness around Garrett's mouth, the barely suppressed anger in his eyes under the thick black hood of his cloak. Garrett had spent 40 years in the Night's Watch, man and boy, and he was not accustomed to being made light of. Yet it was more than that. Under the wounded pride, Will could sense something else in the older man. You could taste it, a nervous tension that became perilous close to fear. Will shared his unease. He had been 4 years on the wall. The first time he had been sent beyond, all the old stories had come rushing back and his bowels had turned to water. He had laughed about it afterward. He was a veteran of 100 rangings by now in the endless dark wilderness that the Southrons called the Haunted Forest had no more terrors for him. Until tonight. Something was different tonight. There was an edge to this darkness that made his hackles rise. 9 days they had been riding, north and northwest and then north again, farther and farther from the wall, hard on the track of a band of wildling raiders. Each day had been worse than the day that had come before it. Today was the worst of all. A cold wind was blowing out of the north, and it made the trees rustle like living things. All day, Will had felt as though something were watching him, something cold and implacable that loved him not. Garrett had felt it too. Will wanted nothing so much as to ride hell-bent for the safety of the wall, but that was not a feeling to share with your commander, especially not a commander like this one. Sir Waymar Royce was the youngest son of an ancient house with too many heirs. He was a handsome youth of 18, gray-eyed and graceful and slender as a knife. Mounted on his huge black destrier, the knight towered above Will and Garrett on their smaller garrons. He wore black leather boots, black woolen pants, black moleskin gloves, and a fine supple coat of gleaming black ringmail over layers of black wool and boiled leather. Sir Waymar had been a sworn brother of the Night's Watch for less than half a year, but no one could say he had not prepared for his vocation, at least in so far as his wardrobe was concerned. His cloak was his crowning glory, sable, thick and black and soft as sin. Bet he killed them all himself, he did, Garrod told the barracks over wine. Twisted their little heads off, our mighty warrior. They had all shared the laugh. It is hard to take orders from a man you laughed at in your cups, Will reflected as he sat shivering atop his garron. Garrod must have felt the same. Mormont said, as we should track them, and we did, Garrod said. They're dead. They shan't trouble us no more. There's hard riding before us, and I don't like this weather. If it snows, we could be a fortnight getting back, and snow's the best we can hope for. Ever seen an ice storm, my lord? The lordling seemed not to hear him. He studied the deepening twilight in that half-bored, half-distracted way he had. Will had ridden with the knight long enough to understand that it was best not to interrupt him when he looked like that. Tell me again what you saw, Will. All the details. Leave nothing out. Will had been a hunter before he joined the Night's Watch. Well, a poacher, in truth. Mallister free rides had caught him red-handed in the Mallister's own woods, skinning one of the Mallister's own bucks, and it had been a choice of putting on the black or losing a hand. No one could move through the woods as silent as Will, and it had not taken the Black brothers long to discover his talent. The camp is 2 miles farther on, over that ridge, hard beside a stream, Will said. I got close as I dared. There's 8 of them, men and women both. No children I could see. They put up a lean-to against the rock. The snow's pretty well covered it now, but I could still make it out. No fire burning, but the fire pit was still plain as day. No one moving. I watched a long time. No living man ever lay so still. Did you see any blood? Well, no, Will admitted. Did you see any weapons? Some swords, a few bows. One man had an axe, heavy-looking, double-bladed, a cruel piece of iron. It was on the ground beside him, right by his hand. Did you make note of the position of the bodies? Will shrugged. A couple are sitting up against the rock, most of them on the ground, fallen like... Or sleeping, Royce suggested. Fallen, Will insisted. There's one woman up on the ironwood, half hid in the branches. A Far Eyes. He smiled thinly. I took care she never saw me. When I got closer, I saw she wasn't moving neither. Despite himself, he shivered. You have a chill? Royce asked. Some, Will muttered. The wind, my lord. The young knight returned back to his grizzled man-at-arms. Frost-fallen leaves whispered past them, and Royce's destrier moved restlessly. What do you think might have killed these men, Garrod? Sir Waymar asked casually. He adjusted the drape of his long sable cloak. It was the cold, Garrod said with an iron certainty. I saw men freeze last winter, and the one before when I was half a boy. Everyone talks about snows 40 foot deep, and how the ice wind comes howling out of the north, but the real enemy is the cold. It steals up on you quieter than will, and at first you shiver, and your teeth chatter, and you stamp your feet and dream of mulled wine and nice hot fires. It burns, it does. Nothing burns like the cold, but only for a while. Then it gets inside you and starts to fill you up, and after a while you don't have the strength to fight it. It's easier to just... It's easier just to sit down or go to sleep. They say you don't feel any pain toward the end. First you go weak and drowsy, and everything starts to fade, and then it's like sinking into a sea of warm milk. Peaceful like. Such eloquence, Garrod, Sir Waymar observed. I never suspected you had it in you. I've had the cold in me too, lordling. Garrod pulled back his hood, giving Sir Waymar a good look at the stumps where his ears had been. 2 ears, 3 toes, and the little finger off my left hand. I got off light. We found my brother frozen at his watch with a smile on his face. Sir Waymar shrugged. You ought dress more warmly, Garrod. Garrod glared at the lordling, the scars around his ear holes flushed red with anger where Maester Aemon had cut the ears away. We'll see how warm you can dress when the winter comes. He pulled up his hood and hunched over his garron, silent and sullen. "If Garrett said it was the cold," Will began. "Have you drawn any watchers this past week, Will?" "Yes, my lord. There never was a week when he did not draw a dozen bloody watches." "What was the man driving at?" "And how did you find the wall?" "Weeping," Will said, frowning. He saw it clear enough, now that the lordling had pointed it out. They couldn't have froze, not if the wall was weeping. It wasn't cold enough. Royce nodded. "Right, lad. We've had a few light frosts this pack week, and a quick flurry of snow now and then, but surely no cold fierce enough to kill 8 grown men. Men clad in fur and leather, let me remind you, with shelter near at hand and the means of making fire." The knight's smile was cocksure. "Will, lead us there. I would see these dead men for myself." And then there was nothing to be done for it. The order had been given, and honor bound them to obey. Will went in front, his shaggy little garron picking the way carefully through the undergrowth. A light snow had fallen the night before, and there were stones and roots and hidden sinks lying just under its crust, waiting for the careless and the unwary. Sir Waymar Royce. Let's try that again. Sir Waymar Royce came next, his great black destrier snorting impatiently. The war horse was the wrong mount for ranging, but try and tell that to the lordling. The war horse was the wrong mount for ranging, but try to tell that to the lordling. Garron brought up the rear. The old man-at-arms muttered to himself as he rode. Twilight deepened. The cloudless sky turned a deep purple, the color of an old bruise, then faded to black. The stars began to come out. A half moon rose. Will was grateful for the light. "We can make a better pace than this, surely," Royce said when the moon was full risen. "Not with this horse," Will said. Fear had made him insolent. "Perhaps my lord would care to take the lead?" Sir Waymar Royce did not deign to reply. Somewhere off in the wood a wolf howled. Sir Waymar looked him over with open disapproval. "I'm not going back to Castle Black a failure on my first ranging. We will find these men." He glanced around. "Up the tree. Be quick about it. Look for a fire." Will turned away, wordless. There was no use to argue. The wind was moving. It cut right through him. He went to the tree, a vaulting gray-green sentinel, and began to climb. Soon his hands were sticky with sap, and he was lost among the needles. Fear filled his gut like a meal he could not digest. He whispered a prayer to the nameless gods of the wood, and slipped his dirk free of its sheath. He put it between his teeth to keep both hands free for climbing. The taste of cold iron in his mouth gave him comfort. Down below, the lordling called out suddenly, "Who goes there?" Will heard uncertainty in the challenge. He stopped climbing. He listened. He watched. The woods gave answer. The rustle of leaves, the icy rush of the streams, a distant hoot of a snow owl. The others made no sound. Will saw movement from the corner of his eye, pale shapes gliding through the wood. He turned his head, glimpsed a white shadow in the darkness. Then it was gone. Branches stirred gently in the wind, scratching at one another with wooden fingers. Will opened his mouth to call down a warning, and the words seemed to freeze in his throat. Perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps it had only been a bird, a reflection on the snow, some trick of the moonlight. What had he seen after all? "Will, where are you?" Sir Waymar called up. "Can you see anything?" He was turning in a slow circle, suddenly wary, his sword in hand. He must have felt them, as Will felt them. There was nothing to see. "Answer me! Why is it so cold?" It was cold. Shivering, Will clung more tightly to his perch. His face pressed hard against the trunk of the sentinel. He could feel the sweet, sticky He could feel the sweet, sticky sap on his cheek. A shadow emerged from the dark of the wood. It stood in front of Royce. Tall it was, and gaunt and hard as old bones, with flesh pale as milk. Its armor seemed to change color as it moved. Here it was white as new fallen snow, there black as shadow. Everywhere dappled the gray-green of the trees. The pattern rained like moonlight on the water with every step it took. Oh, the patterns ran like moonlight on... Damn. I suck at this. Will heard the breath go out of Sir Waymar Royce in a long hiss. "Come no farther," the lordling warned. His voice cracked like a boy's. I'm not going to do that. He threw the long sable cloak back over his shoulders to free his arms for battle and took his sword in both hands. The wind had stopped. It was very cold. The other slid forward on silent feet, and his hand was a long sword like none that Will had ever seen. No human metal had gone into the forging of that blade. It was alive with moonlight, translucent, a shard of crystal so thin that it seemed almost to vanish when seen edge on. There was faint blue shimmer to the thing, a ghost light that played around its edges, and somehow Will knew it was sharper than any razor. Sir Waymar met him bravely. "Dance with me, then." He lifted his sword high over his head, defiant. His hands trembled from the weight of it, or perhaps from the cold. Yet in that moment Will thought he was a boy no longer, but a man of the Night's Watch. The other halted. Will saw its eyes blue, deeper and bluer than any human eyes, a blue that burned like ice. They fixed on the long sword trembling on high, watched the moonlight running cold along the metal. For a heartbeat he dared to hope. They emerged silently from the shadows, twins to the first, 3 of them, 4, 5. Sir Waymar may have felt the cold that came with them, but he never saw them, never heard them. Will had to call out. It was his duty, and his death if he did. He shivered and hugged the tree and kept the silence. The pale sword came shivering through the air. Sir Waymar met it with steel. When the blades met, there was no ring of metal on metal, only a high, thin sound at the edge of hearing, like an animal screaming in pain. Royce checked a second blow and a third, and then fell back a step. Another flurry of blows, and then he fell again. Behind him, to the right, to the left, all around him, the watchers stood patient, faceless, silent, the shifting patterns of their delicate armor making them all but invisible in the wood. Yet they made no move to interfere. Again and again the swords met, until Will wanted to cover his ears against the strange, anguished keening of their clash. Sir Waymar was panting from the effort now, his breath steaming in the moonlight. His blade was white with frost, the others danced with pale blue light. Then Royce's parry came a beat too late. The pale sword bit through the ringmail beneath his arm. The young lord cried out in pain. Blood welled between the rings. It steamed in the cold, and the droplets seemed red as fire where they touched the snow. Sir Waymar's fingers brushed his side. His moleskin glove came away soaked with red. The other said something in a language that Will did not know. His voice was like the cracking of ice on a winter lake, and the words were mocking. Sir Waymar Royce found his fury. "For Robert!" he shouted, and came up snarling, lifting the frost-covered longsword with both hands and swinging it around in a flat sidearm slash with all his weight behind it. The other's parry was almost lazy. But when the blades touched, the steel shattered. A scream echoed through the forest night, and the long sword shivered into 100 brittle pieces, the shards scattering like a rain of needles. Royce went to his knees, shrieking, and covered his eyes. Blood welled between his fingers. The watchers moved forward together, as if some signal had been given. Swords rose and fell, all in deathly silence. It was cold butchery. The pale blade sliced through ringmail as if it were silk. Will closed his eyes. Far beneath him he heard their voices and laughter sharp as icicles. When he found the courage to look again, a long time had passed, and the ridge below was empty. He stayed in the tree, scarce daring to breathe, while the moon crept slowly across the black sky. Finally, his muscles cramping and his fingers numb with cold, he climbed down. Royce's body lay face down in the snow, one arm outflung. The thick sable cloak had been slashed in a dozen places. Lying dead like that, you saw how young he was. A boy. He found what was left of the sword a few feet away, the end splintered and twisted like a tree snatched by lightning. Will knelt, looking around warily, and snatched it up. The broken sword would be his proof. Garrett would know what to make of it, and if not him, then surely that old bear Mormont or Maester Aemon. Would Garrett still be waiting with the horses? He had to hurry. Will rose. Sir Waymar Royce stood over him. His fine clothes were a tatter, his face a ruin. A shard from his sword transfixed the blind white pupil of his left eye. The right eye was open. The pupil burned blue. It saw. The broken sword fell from nerveless fingers. Will closed his eyes to pray. Long, elegant hands brushed his cheek, then tightened around his throat. They were gloved in the finest moleskin and sticky with blood, yet the touch was icy cold. Lord. Waymar Royce is quite the difficult name to pronounce. Okay. That was the prologue. Chapter 1. Bran. The morning had dawned clear and cold, with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them, nervous with excitement. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his lord father and his brothers to see the king's justice done. It was the 9th year of summer, and the 7th of Bran's life. The man had been taken outside a small holdfast in the hills. Robb thought he was a wildling, his sword sworn to Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall. It made Bran's skin prickle to think of it. He remembered the hearth tales old Nan told them. The wildlings were cruel men, she said, slavers and slayers and thieves. They consorted with giants and ghouls, stole girl children in the dead of night, and drank blood from polished horns. And their women lay with the others in the long night, and sire terrible half-human children. But the man they found bound. Let's try that again. But the man they found bound hand and foot to the holdfast wall awaiting the king's justice was old and scrawny, not much taller than Robb. He had lost both ears and a finger to frostbite, and he dressed all in black, the same as a brother of the Night's Watch, except that his furs were ragged and greasy. The breath of man and horse mingled, steaming in the cold morning air, as his lord father had the man cut down from the wall and dragged before them. Robb and Jon sat tall and still on their horses, with Bran between them on his pony, trying to seem older than 7, trying to pretend that he had seen this all before. A faint wind blew through the holdfast gate. Over their heads flapped the banner of the Starks of Winterfell, a grey direwolf racing across an ice-white field. Bran's father sat solemnly on his horse, long brown hair stirring in the wind. His closely trimmed beard was shot with white, making him look older than his 35 years. He had a grim cast to his grey eyes this day, and he seemed not at all the man who would sit before the fire in the evening and talk softly of the age of heroes and the children of the forest. He had taken off father's face, Bran thought, and donned the face of Lord Stark of Winterfell. There were questions asked and answers given there in the chill of the morning, but afterward Bran could not recall much of what had been said. Finally, his lord father gave a command, and 2 of his guardsmen dragged the ragged man to the ironwood stump in the center of the square. They forced his head down onto the hard, black wood. Lord Eddard Stark dismounted, and his ward Theon Greyjoy brought forth the sword. Ice, that sword was called. It was as wide across as a man's hand, and taller even than Robb. The blade was Valyrian steel, spell-forged and dark as smoke. Nothing held an edge like Valyrian steel. His father peeled off his gloves and handed them to Jory Castle, the captain of his household guard. He took hold of Ice with both hands and said, "In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, by the word of Eddard of the House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, I do sentence you to die." He lifted the great sword high above his head. Bran's bastard brother Jon Snow moved closer. "Keep the pony well in hand," he whispered, "and don't look away. Father will know if you do." Bran kept his pony well in hand and did not look away. His father took off the man's head with a single, sure stroke. Blood sprayed out across the snow as red as summer wine. One of the horses reared and had to be restrained to keep from bolting. Bran could not take his eyes off the blood. The snows around the stump drank it eagerly, reddening as he watched. The head bounced off a thick root and rolled. It came up near Greyjoy's feet. Theon was a lean, dark youth of 19 who found everything amusing. He laughed, put his boot on the head, and kicked it away. "Ass," Jon muttered, low enough so Greyjoy did not hear. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder, and Bran looked over at his bastard brother. "You did well," Jon told him solemnly. Jon was 14, an old hand at justice. It seemed colder on the long ride back to Winterfell, though the wind had died by then and the sun was higher in the sky. Bran rode with his brothers well ahead of the main party, his pony struggling hard to keep up with their horses. "The deserter died bravely," Robb said. He was big and broad and growing every day, with his mother's coloring, the fair skin, red-brown hair, and blue eyes of the Tullys of Riverrun. He had courage at the least. "No," Jon Snow said quietly. "It was not courage. This one was dead of fear. You could see it in his eyes, Stark." Jon's eyes were a gray so dark they almost seemed black, but there was little they did not see. He was of an age with Robb, but they did not look alike. Jon was slender, where Robb was muscular, dark where Robb was fair, graceful and quick where his half-brother was strong and fast. Robb was not impressed. "The others take his eyes," he swore. "He died well. Race you to the bridge." "Done," Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed, and they galloped off down the trail, Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. The hooves of their horses kicked up showers of snow as they went. Bran did not try to follow. His pony could not keep up. He had seen the ragged man's eyes, and he was thinking of them now. After a while, the sound of Robb's laughter receded, and the woods grew silent again. So deep in thought was he that he never heard the rest of the party until his father moved up to ride beside him. "Are you well, Bran?" he asked, not unkindly. "Yes, father," Bran told him. He looked up. Wrapped in his furs and leathers, mounted on his great war horse, his lord father loomed over him like a giant. "Robb says the man died bravely, but Jon says he was afraid." "What do you think?" his father asked. Bran thought about it. "Can a man still be brave if he's afraid?" "That is the only time a man can be brave," his father told him. "Do you understand why I did it?" "He was a wildling," Bran said. "They carry off women and sell them to the others." His lord father smiled. "Old Nan has been telling you stories again. In truth, the man was an oath-breaker, a deserter from the Night's Watch. No man is more dangerous. The deserter knows his life is forfeit if he is taken, so he will not flinch from any crime, no matter how vile. But you mistake me. The question was not why the man had to die, but why I must do it. Bran had no answer for that. King Robert has a headsman, he said, uncertainly. He does, his father admitted, as did the Targaryen kings before him. Yet our way is the older way. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to the belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you had taken man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. And if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. One day, Bran, you will be Robb's bannerman, holding a keep of your own for your brother and your king, and justice will fall to you. When that day comes, you must take no pleasure in the task, but neither must you look away. A ruler who hides behind paid executioners soon forgets what death is. That was when Jon reappeared on the crest of the hill before them. He waved and shouted down at them, "Father, Bran, come quickly, see what Robb has found." Then he was gone again. Jory rode up beside them. "Trouble, my lord." "Beyond a doubt," his lord father said. "Come, let us see what mischief my sons have rooted out now." He sent his horse into a trot. Jory and Bran and the rest came after him. They found Robb on the river bank north of the bridge, with Jon still mounted beside him. The late summer snows had been heavy this moon turn. Robb stood knee-deep in white, his hood pulled back so the sun shone in his hair. He was cradling something in his arm, while the boys talked in hushed, excited voices. The riders picked their way carefully through the drifts, groping for solid footing on the hidden, uneven ground. Jory, Castellan, and Theon Greyjoy were the first to reach the boys. Greyjoy was laughing and joking as he rode. Bran heard the breath go out of him. "Gods!" he exclaimed, struggling to keep control of his horse as he reached for his sword. Jory's sword was already out. "Robb, get away from it!" he called as his horse reared under him. Robb grinned and looked up from the bundle in his arms. "She can't hurt you," he said. "She's dead, Jory." Bran was afire with curiosity by then. He would have spurred the pony faster, but his father made him dismount by the bridge and approach on foot. Bran jumped off and ran. By then, Jon, Jory, and Theon Greyjoy had all dismounted as well. "What in the seven hells is it?" Greyjoy was saying. "A wolf," Robb told him. "A freak," Greyjoy said. "Look at the size of it." Bran's heart was thumping in his chest as he pushed through a waist-high drift to his brother's side. Half buried in the blood-stained snow, a huge dark shape slumped in death. Ice had formed in its shaggy gray fur, and the faint smell of corruption clung to it like a woman's perfume. Bran glimpsed blind eyes crawling with maggots, a wide mouth full of yellowed teeth. But it was the size of it that made him gasp. It was bigger than his pony, twice the size of the largest hound in his father's kennel. "It's no freak," Jon said calmly. "That's a dire wolf. They grow larger than any other kind." Theon Greyjoy said, "There's not been a dire wolf sighted south of the wall in 200 years. "I see one now," Jon replied. Bran tore his eyes away from the monster. That was when he noticed the bundle in Robb's arms. He gave a cry of delight and moved closer. The pup was a tiny ball of gray-black fur, its eyes still closed. It nuzzled blindly against Robb's chest as he cradled it, searching for milk among his leathers, making a sad, little whimpery sound. Bran reached out hesitantly. "Go on," Robb told him. "You can touch him." Bran gave the pup a quick, nervous stroke, then turned as Jon said, "Here you go." His half-brother put a second pup into his arms. There are 5 of them. Bran sat down in the snow and hugged the wolf pup up to his face. Its fur was soft and warm against his cheek. Direwolves loose in the realm after so many years, muttered Holland, the master of horse. I like it not. It is a sign, Jory said. Father frowned. This is only a dead animal, Jory, he said, yet he seemed troubled. Snow crunched under his boots as he moved around the body. Do we know what killed her? There's something in the throat, Robb told him, proud to have found the answer before his father even asked. There, just under the jaw. His father knelt and groped under the beast's head with his hand. He gave a yank and held it up for all to see. A foot of shattered antler, tine snapped off, all wet with blood. A sudden silence descended over the party. The men looked at the antler uneasily, and no one dared to speak. Even Bran could sense their fear, though he did not understand it. His father tossed the antler to the side and cleansed his hands in the snow. I'm surprised she lived long enough to whelp, he said. His voice broke the spell. Maybe she didn't, Jory said. I've heard tales. Maybe the bitch was already dead when the pups came. Born with the dead, another man put in. Worse luck. No matter, said Holland. They be dead soon enough, too. Bran gave a wordless cry of dismay. The sooner the better, Theon Greyjoy agreed. He drew his sword. Give the beast here, Bran. The little thing squirmed against him as if it heard and understood. No! Bran cried out fiercely. It's mine! Put your sword away, Greyjoy, Robb said. For a moment he sounded as commanding as their father, like the lord he would someday be. He will keep these pups. You cannot do that, boy, said Harwin, who was Holland's son. It be a mercy to kill them, Holland said. Bran looked to his lord father for rescue, but got only a frown, a furrowed brow. Holland speaks truly, son. Better swift death than a hard one from cold and starvation. No! He could feel tears welling in his eyes, and he looked away. He did not want to cry in front of his father. Robb resisted stubbornly. Sir Roderick's red bitch whelped again last week, he said. It was a small litter, only 2 live pups. She'll have milk enough. She'll rip them apart when they try to nurse. Lord Stark, Jon said. It was strange to hear him call father that. So formal. Bran looked at him with desperate hope. There are 5 pups, he told father. 3 male, 2 female. What of it, Jon? You have 5 true-born children, Jon said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. Bran saw his father's face change, saw the other men exchange glances. He loved Jon with all his heart at that moment. Even at 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The Count had come right only because Jon had omitted himself. He had included the girls, included even Rickon, the baby, but not the bastard who bore the surname Snow, the name that custom decreed be given to all those in the north unlucky enough to be born with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. You want no pup for yourself, Jon? He asked softly. The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark, Jon pointed out. I am no Stark, father. Their lord father regarded Jon thoughtfully. Robb rushed into the silence as he left. I will nurse him myself, father, he promised. I will soak a towel with warm milk and give him suck from that. Me too, Bran echoed. The lord weighed his sons long and carefully with his eyes. Easy to say and harder to do. I will not have you wasting the servants' time with this. If you want these pups, you will feed them yourselves. Is that understood? Bran nodded eagerly. The pup squirmed in his grasp, licked at his face with a warm tongue. You must train them as well, their father said. You must train them. The kennel master will have nothing to do with these monsters, I promise you that. And the gods will help you. And the gods help you if you neglect them, or brutalize them, or train them badly. These are not dogs to beg for treats and slink off at a kick. A direwolf will rip a man's arm off his shoulder as easily as a dog will kill a rat. Are you sure you want this? Yes, father, Bran said. Yes, Robb agreed. The pups may die anyway, despite all you do. They won't die, Robb said. We won't let them die. Keep them then. Dory, Desmond, gather up the other pups. It's time we were back to Winterfell. It was not until they were mounted and on their way that Bran allowed himself. God damn! It was not until they were mounted and on their way that Bran allowed himself to taste the sweet air of victory. By then, his pup was snuggled inside his leathers, warm against him, safe for the long ride home. Bran was wondering what to name him. Halfway across the bridge, Jon pulled up suddenly. "What is it, Jon?" their lord father asked. "Can't you hear it?" Bran could hear the wind in the trees, the clatter of their hooves in the iron planks, the whimpering of his hungry pup. But Jon was listening to something else. "There," Jon said. He swung his horse around and galloped back across the bridge. They watched him dismount when the direwolf lay dead in the snow, watched him kneel. A moment later, he was riding back to them, smiling. "He must have crawled away from the others," Jon said. "Or been driven away," their father said, looking at the sixth pup. His fur was white, where the rest of the litter was gray. His eyes were as red as the blood of the ragged man who had died that morning. Bran thought it curious that this pup alone would have opened his eyes while the others were still blind. "An albino," Theon Greyjoy said with wry amusement. "This one will die even faster than the others." Jon Snow gave his father's ward a long, chilling look. "I think not, Greyjoy," he says. "This one belongs to me." Ugh. What a fun chapter. Chapter 1, truly, it is very, very fun. George R. R. Martin really knows how to start off a story. Okay. Chapter 2. Catelyn. Catelyn had never liked this Godswood. She had been born at Tully, at Riverrun far to the south, on the red fork of the Trident. The Godswood, there was a garden, bright and airy, where tall redwoods spread dappled shadows across tinkling streams. Birds sang from hidden nests, and the air was spicy with the scent of flowers. The gods of Winterfell kept a different sort of wood. It was a dark, primal place, 3 acres of old forest, untouched for 10,000 years as the gloomy castle rose around it. It smelled of moist earth and decay. No redwoods grew here. This was a wood of stubborn sentinel trees armored in gray-green needles, of mighty oaks, of ironwoods as old as the realm itself. Here, thick black trunks crowded close together, while twisted branches wove a dense canopy overhead, and misshapen roots wrestled beneath the soil. This was a place of deep silence and brooding shadows, and the gods who lived here had no names. But she knew she would find her husband here tonight. Whenever he took a man's life afterward, he would seek the quiet of the Godswood. Catelyn had been anointed with the 7 oils and named in the rainbow of light that filled the sept of Riverrun. She was of the faith, like her father and grandfather and his father before him. Her gods had names, and their faces were as familiar as the faces of her parents. Worship was a septon with a censer, the smell of incense, a 7-sided crystal alive with light, voices raised in song. The Tullys kept a godswood, as all the great houses did, but it was only a place to walk or read or lie in the sun. Worship was for the sept. For her sake, Ned had built a small sept where she might sing to the 7 faces of God, but the blood of the first men still flowed in the veins of the Starks, and his own gods were the old ones, the nameless, faceless gods of the greenwood they shared with the vanished children of the forest. At the center of the grove, an ancient weirwood brooded over a small pool where the waters were black and cold. The heart tree, Ned called it. The weirwood's bark was white as bone, its leaves dark red like 1,000 blood-stained hands. A face had been carved in the trunk of the great tree, its features long and melancholy, the deep-cut eyes red with dried sap and strangely watchful. They were old, those eyes, older than Winterfell itself. They had seen Brandon the Builder set the first stone, if the tales were true. They had watched the castle's granite walls rise around them. It was said that the children of the forest had carved the faces in the trees during the dawn of centuries, before the coming of the first men across the narrow sea. In the south, the last weirwoods had been cut down or burnt out 1,000 years ago, except on the Isle of Faces where the green men kept their silent watch. Upon here it was different. Here, every castle had its godswood, and every godswood had its heart tree, and every heart tree its face. Catelyn found her husband beneath the weirwood, seated on a moss-covered stone. The great sword Ice was across his lap, and he was cleaning the blade in those waters black as night. 1,000 years of humus lay thick upon the godswood floor, swallowing the sound of her feet, but the red eyes of the weirwood seemed to follow her as she came. "Ned," she called softly. He lifted his head to look at her. "Catelyn," he said. His voice was distant and formal. "Where are the children?" He would always ask her that. "In the kitchen, arguing about names for the wolf pups." She spread her cloak on the forest floor and sat beside the pool, her back to the weirwood. She could feel the eyes watching her, but she did her best to ignore them. "Arya is already in love, and Sansa is charmed and gracious, but Rickon is not quite sure." "Is he afraid?" Ned asked. "A little," she admitted. "He is only 3. Ned frowned. "He must learn to face his fears. He will not be 3 forever. And winter is coming." "Yes," Catelyn agreed. The words gave her a chill, as they always did. The Stark words. Every noble house had its words, family mottos, touchstones, prayers of sorts. They boasted of honor and glory, promised loyalty and truth, swore faith and courage. All but the Starks. "Winter is coming," said the Stark words. Not for the first time, she reflected on what a strange people these northerners were. "The man died well, I'll give him that," Ned said. He had a swatch of oiled leather in one hand. He ran it lightly upon the great sword as he spoke, polishing the metal to a dark glow. "I was glad for Bran's sake. You would have been proud of Bran." "I am always proud of Bran," Catelyn replied, watching the sword as he stroked it. She could see the rippling deep within the steel, where the metal had been folded back on itself 100 times in the forging. Catelyn had no love for swords, but she could not deny that ice had its own beauty. It had been forged in Valyria before the doom had come to the old freehold, when the ironsmiths had worked their metal with spells as well as hammers. 400 years old it was, and as deep as the day it was forged, and as sharp as the day it was forged. Where did deep come from? The name it bore was older still, a legacy from the Age of Heroes, when the Starks were kings in the north. "He was the 4th this year," Ned said grimly. "The poor man was half mad. Something had put a fear in him so deep that my words could not reach him." He sighed. "Ben writes that the strength of the Night's Watch is down below 1,000. It's not only desertions. They are losing men on rangings as well." "Is it the wildlings?" she asked. "Who else?" Ned lifted ice, looked down the cold steel length of it. "And it will only grow worse. The day may come when I will have no choice but to call the banners and ride north to deal with this king beyond the wall for good and all." Beyond the wall? The thought made Catelyn shudder. Ned saw the dread on her face. Mance Rayder is nothing for us to fear. "There are darker things beyond the wall." She glanced behind her at the heart tree, the pale bark and red eyes, watching, listening, thinking its long, slow thoughts. His smile was gentle. "You listen to too many of old Nan's stories. The others are as dead as the children of the forest, gone 8,000 years. Maester Luwin will tell you they never lived at all. No living man has ever seen one." Until this morning, no living man had ever seen a dire wolf either, Catelyn reminded him. I ought to know better than to argue with a Tully, he said with a rueful smile. He slid ice back into its sheath. You did not come here to tell me of crib tales. Oh, you did not here to tell me crib tales. I know how little you like this place. What is it, my lady? Catelyn took her husband's hand. There was grievous news today, my lord. I did not wish to trouble you until you had cleansed yourself. There was no way to soften the blow, so she told him straight. I am so sorry, my love. Jon Arryn is dead. His eyes found hers, and she could see how hard it took him, as she had known it would. In his youth, Ned had fostered at the Eyrie, and the childless Lord Arryn had become a second father to him and his fellow ward Robert Baratheon. When the Mad King Aerys II Targaryen had demanded their heads, the Lord of the Eyrie had raised his moon and falcon banners in revolt rather than give up those he pledged to protect. And one day, 15 years ago, this second father had become a brother as well, as he and Ned stood together at the at River Run to wed two sisters, the daughters of Lord Hoster Tully. John, he said, is this news certain? It was the king's seal, and the letter was in Robert's own hand. I saved it for you. He said Lord Arryn was taken quickly. Even Maester Pycelle was helpless, but he brought the milk of the poppy, so John did not linger long in pain. That is some small mercy, I suppose, he said. She could see the grief on his face, but even then he thought first of her. Your sister, he said, and John's boy. What word of them? The message said only that they were well and had returned to the Eyrie, Catelyn said. I wish they had gone to River Run instead. The Eyrie is high and lonely, and it was ever her husband's place, not hers. Lord John's memory will haunt each stone. I know my sister. She needs the comfort of family and friends around her. Your uncle waits in the Vale, does he not? John named him Knight of the Gate, I'd heard. Catelyn nodded. Brynden will do what he can for her, and for the boy. That is some comfort. But still... Go to her, Ned urged. Take the children. Fill her halls with noise and shouts and laughter. That boy of hers needs other children about him, and Lysa should not be alone in her grief. Would that I could, Catelyn said. The letter had other tidings. The king is riding to Winterfell to seek you out. It took Ned a moment to comprehend her words, but when the understanding came, the darkness left his eyes immediately. Robert is coming here. When she nodded, a smile broke across his face. Catelyn wished she could share his joy. But she had heard the talk in the yards. A direwolf dead in the snow, a broken antler in its throat. Dread coiled within her like a snake, but she forced herself to smile at this man she loved, this man who put no faith in signs. I knew this would please you, she said. We should send word to your brother on the wall. Yes, of course, he agreed. Ben will want to be here. I shall tell Maester Luwin to send his swiftest bird. Ned rose and pulled her to her feet. Damnation, how many years has it been? And he gives us no more notice than this? How many in his party did the message say? I should think 100 knights at the least, with all their retainers, and half again as many free riders. Cersei and the children travel with them. Robert will keep an easy pace for their sakes, he said. It is just as well. That will give us more time to prepare. The Queen's brothers are also in the party, she told him. Ned grimaced at that. There was small love between him and the Queen's family, Catelyn knew. The Lannisters of Casterly Rock had come late to Robert's cause, when victory was all but certain, and he had never forgiven them. Well, if the price for Robert's company is an infestation of Lannisters, so be it. It sounds as though Robert is bringing half the court. Where the king goes, the realm follows, she said. It will be good to see the children. The youngest was still sucking at the Lannister woman's teat the last time I saw him. He must be, 5 by now? Prince Tommen is 7, she told him, the same as Bran. Please, Ned, guard your tongue. The Lannister woman is our queen, and her pride is said to grow with each passing year. I don't know why her voice got so high. Ned squeezed her hand. There must be a feast, of course, with singers, and Robert will want to hunt. I shall send Jory south with an honor guard to meet them on the King's Road and escort them back. Gods, how are we going to feed them all? On his way already, you said? Damn the man, damn his royal hide. So great. So great. Okay, our next chapter brings us away from the Starks. Very exciting. Chapter 3. Daenerys. Her brother held the gown up for her inspection. This is beauty. Touch it. Go on. Caress the fabric. Dany touched it. The cloth was so smooth that it seemed to run through her fingers like water. She could not remember ever wearing anything so soft. It frightened her. She pulled her hand away. Is it really mine? A gift from the Magister Illyrio, Viserys said, smiling. Her brother was in a high mood tonight. The color will bring out the violet in your eyes, and you shall have gold as well, and jewel of all sorts. Illyrio has promised. Tonight you must look like a princess. A princess, Dany thought. She had forgotten what that was like. Perhaps she had never really known. Why does he give us so much? She asked. What does he want from us? For nigh on half a year they had lived in the Magister's house, eating his food, pampered by his servants. Dany was 13, old enough to know that such gifts seldom come with their price here in the free city of Pentos. Old enough to know that such gifts seldom come without their price here in the free city of Pentos. Illyrio is no fool, Viserys said. He was a gaunt young man with nervous hands and a feverish look in his pale lilac eyes. The Magister knows that I will not forget my friends when I come into my throne. Dany said nothing. Magister Illyrio was a dealer in spices, gemstones, dragonbone, and other less savory things. He had friends in all 9 of the free cities, it was said, and even beyond in Vice Dothrak and the fabled lands beyond the Jade Sea. It was also said that he'd never had a friend he wouldn't cheerfully sell for the right price. Dany listened to the talk in the streets, and she heard these things, but she knew better than to question her brother when he wove his webs of dreams. His anger was a terrible thing when roused. Viserys called it waking the dragon. Her brother hung the gown beside the door. Illyrio will send the slaves to bathe you. Be sure you wash off the stink of the stables. Khal Drogo has 1,000 horses. Tonight he looks for a different sort of mount. He stuttered. He studied her critically. You still slouch. Straighten yourself. He pushed back her fingers. What? He pushed back her shoulders with his hands. Let them see that you have a woman's shape now. His fingers brushed lightly over her budding breasts and tightened on a nipple. You will not fail me tonight. If you do, it will go hard for you. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? His fingers twisted her, the pinch cruelly hard through the rough fabric of her tunic. Do you? He repeated. No, Dany said meekly. Her brother smiled. Good. He touched her hair almost with affection. When they write the history of my reign, sweet sister, they will say that it began tonight. When he was gone, Dany went to her window and looked out wistfully on the waters of the bay. The square brick towers of Pentos were black silhouettes outlined against the setting sun. Dany could hear the singing of red priests as they lit their night fires and the shouts of the ragged children playing games beyond the walls of the estate. For a moment she wished she could be out there with them, barefoot and breathless and dressed in tatters, with no past and no future, and no feast to attend at Khal Drogo's manse. Somewhere beyond the sunset, across the narrow sea, lay a land of green hills and flowered plains and great rushing rivers, where towers of dark stone rose amidst magnificent blue-gray mountains, and armored knights rode to battle beneath the banners of their lords. The Dothraki called that land Reich Andali, the land of the Andals. In the free cities, they talked of Westeros and the sunset kingdoms. Her brother had a simpler name. Our land, he called it. The words were like a prayer with him. If he said them enough, the gods were sure to hear. Ours by blood right, taken from us by treachery, but ours still, ours forever. You do not steal from the dragons. Oh no, the dragon remembers. And perhaps the dragon didn't remember, but Dany could not. She had never seen this land her brother said was theirs, this realm beyond the narrow sea. These places he talked of, Casterly Rock and the eerie High Garden and the Vale of Arryn, Dorne and the Isle of Faces. They were just words to her. Viserys had been a boy of 8 when they fled King's Landing to escape the advancing armies of the usurper, but Daenerys had only been a quickening in her mother's womb. Yet sometimes Dany would picture the way it had been, so often that her brother told her the stories. The midnight flight to Dragonstone, moonlight shimmering on the ship's black sails, her brother Rhaegar battling the usurper in the bloody waters of the Trident and dying for the woman he loved. The sack of King's Landing by the ones Viserys called the usurper's dogs, the lords Lannister and Stark. Princess Elia of Dorne pleading for mercy as Rhaegar's heir was ripped from her breast and murdered before her eyes. The polished skulls of the last dragon staring down sightlessly from the walls of the throne room while the Kingslayer opened father's throat with the golden sword. She had been born on Dragonstone 9 moons after their flight, while a raging summer storm threatened to rip the island fastness apart. They said that storm was terrible. The Targaryen fleet was smashed while it lay at anchor, and huge stone blocks were ripped from the parapets and sent hurtling into the wild waters of the narrow sea. Her mother had died birthing her, and for that her brother Viserys had never forgiven her. She did not remember Dragonstone either. They had run again just before the usurper's brother set sail with his new-built fleet. But then only Dragonstone itself, the ancient seat of their house, had remained of the 7 kingdoms that had once been theirs. But it would not remain for long. The garrison that had been prepared to sell them to the usurper, but one night Sir Willem Darry and 4 loyal men had broken into the nursery and stolen them both, along with her wet nurse, and set sail under cover of darkness for the safety of the Bravosian coast. She remembered Sir Willem dimly, a great grey bear of a man, half-blind, roaring and bellowing orders from his sickbed. The servants had lived in terror of him, but he had always been kind to Dany. He called her little princess and sometimes my lady, and his hands were soft as old leather. He never left his bed, though, and the smell of sickness clung to him day and night, a hot, moist, sickly sweet odor. That was when they lived in Braavos, in the big house with the red door. Dany had her own room there, with a lemon tree outside her window. After Sir Willem had died, the servants had stolen what little money they had left, and soon after they had been put out of the big house. Dany had cried when the red door closed behind them forever. They had wandered since then, from Braavos to Myr, from Myr to Tyrosh, and on to Qohar and Volantis and Lys, never staying long in any one place. Her brother would not allow it. The usurpers of hired knives were close behind them, he insisted, though Dany had never seen one. At first the magisters and archons and merchant princes were pleased to welcome the last Targaryens to their homes and tables, but as the years passed and the usurper continued to sit upon the Iron Throne, doors closed and their lives grew meaner. Years passed, they had been forced to sell their last few treasures, and now even the coin they had gotten from Mother's crown had gone. In the alleys and wine sinks of Pentos, they had called her brother the Beggar King. Dany did not want to know what they called her. "We will have it all back some day, sweet sister," he would promise her. Sometimes his hands shook when he talked about it. "The jewels and the silks, Dragonstone and King's Landing, the Iron Throne and the 7 kingdoms, all they have taken from us. We will have it back." Viserys lived for that day. All that Daenerys wanted was the big house with the red door, the lemon tree outside her window, the childhood she had never known. There was a soft knock on her door. "Come," Dany said, turning away from the window. Illyrio's servants entered, bowed, and set about their business. They were slaves, a gift from one of the Magister's many Dothraki friends. There was no slavery in the free city of Pentos. Nonetheless, they were slaves. The old woman, small and gray as a mouse, never said a word, but the girl made up for it. She was Illyrio's favorite, a fair-haired, blue-eyed wench of 16 who chattered constantly as she worked. They filled her bath with hot water brought up from the kitchen and scented it with fragrant oils. The girl pulled the rough cotton tunic over Dany's head and helped her into the tub. The water was scalding hot, but Daenerys did not flinch or cry out. She liked the heat. It made her feel clean. Besides, her brother had often told her that it was never too hot for a Targaryen. Ours is the house of the dragon, he would say. The fire is in our blood. The old woman washed her long, silver-pale hair and gently combed out the snags, all in silence. The girl scrubbed her back and her feet and told her how lucky she was. "Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wear golden collars. 100,000 men ride in his Khalasar, and his palace in Vaes Dothrak has 200 rooms and doors of solid silver." There was more like that, so much more. What a handsome man the Khal was, so tall and fierce, fearless in battle, the best rider to ever mount a horse, a demon archer. Daenerys said nothing. She had always assumed that she would wed Viserys when she came of age. For centuries, the Targaryens had married brother to sister, since Aegon the Conqueror had taken his sisters to bride. The line must be kept pure, Viserys had told her 1,000 times. Theirs was the king's blood, the golden blood of old Valyria, the blood of the dragon. Dragons did not mate with the beasts of the field, and Targaryens did not mingle their blood with that of lesser men. Yet now Viserys schemed to sell her to a stranger, a barbarian. When she was clean, the slaves helped her from the water and toweled her dry. The girl brushed her hair until it shone like molten silver, while the old woman anointed her with the spice-flower perfume of the Dothraki plains, a dab on each wrist, behind her ears, on the tips of her breasts, and one last one, cool on her lips, down there between her legs. They dressed her in the wisps that Magister Illyrio had sent up, and then the gown, a deep plum silk to bring out the violet in her eyes. The girl slid the gilded sandals under her feet, while the old woman fixed the tiara in her hair and slid golden bracelets crusted with amethysts around her wrists. Last of all came the collar, a heavy golden torque emblazoned with ancient Valyrian glyphs. "Now you look a princess," the girl said breathlessly when they were done. Dany glanced at her image in the silvered looking-glass that Illyrio had so thoughtfully provided. A princess, she thought. But she remembered what the girl had said, how Khal Drogo was so rich that even his slaves wore golden collars. She felt a sudden chill, and goose flesh pimpled her bare arms. Her brother was waiting in the cool of the entry hall, seated on the edge of the pool, his hand trailing in the water. He rose when she appeared and looked her over critically. "Stand there," he told her. "Turn around. Yes, good. You look regal," Magister Illyrio said, stepping through an archway. He moved with surprising delicacy for such a massive man. Beneath loose garments of flame-colored silk, rolls of fat jiggled as he walked. Gemstones glittered on every finger, and his man had oiled his... I thought I read it wrong, but I didn't. His man had oiled his forked yellow beard until it shone like real gold. "May the Lord of Light shower you with blessings on this most fortunate day, Princess Daenerys," the Magister said as he took her hand. He bowed his head, showed a thin glimpse of a crooked yellow teeth through the gold of his beard. "She is a vision, your grace, a vision," he told her brother. "Drogo will be enraptured." "She's too skinny," Viserys said. His hair, the same silver blonde as hers, had been pulled back tightly behind his head and fastened with a dragon bone brooch. It was his severe look that emphasized the hard, gaunt lines of his face. He rested his hand on the hilt of the sword that Illyrio had lent him, and said, "Are you sure that Khal Drogo likes his women this young? She has had her blood. She is old enough for the call." Which is so gross. Illyrio told him, not for the first time. "Look at her. That silver gold hair, those purple eyes. She is the blood of old Valyria, no doubt, and high-born, daughter of the old king, sister to the new. She cannot fail to entrance our Drogo." When he released her hand, Daenerys found herself trembling. "I suppose," her brother said doubtfully, "the savages have queer tastes. Boys, horses, sheep. Best not suggest this to Khal Drogo," Illyrio said. Anger flashed in her brother's lilac eyes. "Do you take me for a fool?" The Magister bowed slightly. "I take you for a king. Kings lack the caution of common men. My apologies if I have given offense." He turned away and clapped his hands for his bearers. The streets of Pentos were pitch dark when they set out in Illyrio's elaborately carved palanquin. 2 servants went ahead to light their way, carrying ornate oil lanterns with panes of pale blue glass, while a dozen strong men hoisted the poles to their shoulders. It was warm and close inside the curtains. Dany could smell the stench of Illyrio's pallid flesh through his heavy perfumes. Her brother, sprawled out on his pillows beside her, never noticed. His mind was away across the narrow sea. "We won't need this whole Khalasar," Viserys said. His fingers toyed with the hilt of his borrowed blade, though Dany knew he had never used a sword in earnest. 10,000, that would be enough. I could sweep the 7 kingdoms with 10,000 Dothraki screamers. The realm will rise for its rightful king. Tyrell, Redwine, Derry, Greyjoy, they have no more love for the usurper than I do. The Dornish men burn to avenge Elia and her children, and the small folk will be with us. They cry out for their king." He looked at Illyrio anxiously. "They do, don't they? They are your people, and they love you well," Magister Illyrio said amiably. "And hold fast all across the realm, men lift secret toasts to your health, while women sew dragon banners and hide them against the day of your return from across the water." He gave a massive shrug. "Or so my agents tell me." Dany had no agents, no way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio's sweet words as she mistrusted everything about Illyrio. Her brother was nodding eagerly. However, "I will kill the usurper myself," he promised, who had never killed anyone, "as he killed my brother Rhaegar, and a Lannister too, the Kingslayer, for what he did to my father." "That would be most fitting," Illyrio said. Dany saw the smallest hint of a smile playing around his full lips, but her brother did not seem to notice. Nodding, he pushed back a curtain and stared off into the night, and Dany knew he was fighting the Battle of the Trident once again. The 9-towered manse of Khal Drogo sat beside the waters of the bay, its high brick walls overgrown with pale ivy. It had been given to the Khal by the Magisters of Pentos, Illyrio told them. The free cities were always generous with the horse lords. "It is not that we fear these barbarians," Illyrio would explain with a smile. "The Lord of Light would hold our city walls against 1,000,000 Dothraki, or so the Red Priests promise. Yet, why take chances when their friendship comes so cheap?" Their palanquin was stopped at the gate, the curtains pulled roughly back by one of the house guards. He had copper skin and dark almond eyes of a Dothraki, but his face was hairless, and he wore the spiked bronze cap of the Unsullied. He looked them over coldly. Magister Illyrio growled something to him in a rough Dothraki tongue. The guardsmen replied in the same voice and waved them through the gates. Daenerys noticed that her brother's hand was clenched tightly around the hilt of his borrowed sword. He looked almost as frightened as she felt. "Insolent eunuch," Viserys muttered as the palanquin lurched toward the manse. Magister Illyrio's words were honey. "Many important men will be at the feast tonight. Such men have enemies. The Cull must protect his guests, yourself chief among them, your grace. No doubt the usurper would pay well for your head. Oh, yes, Viserys said darkly. He has tried, Illyrio, I promise you that. His hired knives follow us everywhere. I'm the last dragon, and he will not sleep easy while I live. The palanquin slowed and stopped. The curtains were thrown back, and a slave offered a hand to help Daenerys out. His color, she noted, was ordinary bronze. Her brother followed, one hand still clenched around his sword hilt. It took 2 strong men to get Magister Illyrio back on his feet. Inside the manse, the air was heavy with the scent of spices, pinch fire, and sweet lemon and cinnamon. They were escorted across the entry hall, where a This is a difficult chapter. Where a mosaic of colored glass depicted the doom of Illyria. Oil burned in black iron lanterns all across the walls. Beneath an arch of twining stone leaves, a eunuch sang their coming. Bless me. Viserys of the House Targaryen, the third of his name, he called in a high, sweet voice. King of the Andals and the Rhoynar, and the first man, Lord of the 7 kingdoms, and protector of the realm. His sister Daenerys Stormborn, princess of Dragonstone. His honorable host, Illyrio Mopatis, magister of the free city of Pentos. They stepped past the eunuch into a pillared courtyard, overgrown in pale ivory. Moonlight painted the leaves in shades of bone and silver as the guests drifted among them. Most were Dothraki horse lords, big men with red-brown skin, their drooping mustachios bound in metal rings, their black hair oiled and braided and hung with bells. Yet among them moved bravos and sellswords from Pentos and Myr and Tyrosh, a red priest even fatter than Illyrio, hairy men from the port of Ibn, and lords from the Summer Isles with skin as black as ebony. Daenerys looked at them all in wonder, and realized, with a sudden start of fear, that she was the only woman there. Illyrio whispered to them. Those 3 are Drogo's blood riders there, he said. By the pillars call Moro, with his son Rigoro. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The man with the green beard is brother to the Archon of Tyrosh, and the man behind him is Ser Jorah Mormont. The last name caught Daenerys. A knight. No less. Illyrio smiled through his beard. Anointed with 7 oils by the High Septon himself. What is he doing here? She blurted. The usurper wanted his head, Illyrio told them. Some trifling affront. He sold some poachers to a Tyroshi slaver instead of giving them to the Night's Watch. Absurd law. A man should be able to do as he likes with his own chattel. I shall wish to speak with Ser Jorah before the night is done, her brother said. Dany found herself looking at the knight curiously. He was an older man, past 40 and balding, but still strong and fit. Instead of silks and cottons, he wore wool and leather. His tunic was a dark green, embroidered with the likeness of a black bear standing on 2 legs. She was still looking at this strange man from the homeland she had never known, when Magister Illyrio placed a moist hand on her bare shoulder. Over there, sweet princess, he said. There is the Cull himself. Dany wanted to run and hide, but her brother was looking at her, and if she displeased him, she knew she would wake the dragon. Anxiously, she turned and looked at the man Viserys hoped would ask to wed her before the night was done. The slave girl had not been far wrong, she thought. Khal Drogo was a head taller than the tallest man in the room, yet somehow light on his feet, as graceful as the panther in Illyrio's menagerie. He was younger than she'd thought, no more than 30. His skin was the color of polished copper, his thick mustachios bound with gold and bronze rings. Lord, I can't speak. I must go and make my submissions, Magister Illyrio said. Wait here. I shall bring him to you. Her brother took her by the arm as Illyrio waddled over to the call, his fingers squeezing her so hard that they hurt. "Did you see his braid, sweet sister?" Drogo's braid was black as midnight and heavy with scented oil, hung with tiny bells that rang softly as he moved. It swung well past his belt, below even his buttocks, the end of it brushing against the back of his thighs. "Do you see how long it is?" Viserys said. "When Dothraki are defeated in combat, they cut off their braids in disgrace, so the world will know their shame. Khal Drogo has never lost a fight. He is Aegon the Dragon Lord come again, and you will be his queen." Dany looked at Khal Drogo. His face was hard and cruel, his eyes as cold and dark as onyx. Her brother hurt her sometimes when she woke the dragon, but he did not frighten her the way this man frightened her. "I don't want to be his queen," she heard herself say in a small, thin voice. Please, Viserys, I don't want to. I want to go home." "Home?" He kept his voice low, but she could hear the fury in his tone. "How are we going to go home, sweet sister? They took our home from us." He drew her into the shadows, out of sight, his fingers digging into her skin. "How are we to go home?" he repeated, meaning King's Landing and Dragonstone and all the realm they had lost. Dany had only meant their rooms in Illyrio's estate. No true home, surely, though all they had, but her brother did not want to hear that. There was no home there for him. Even the big house with the red door had not been home for him. His fingers dug hard into her arm, demanding an answer. "I don't know," she said at last, her voice breaking. Tears welled in her eyes. "I do," he said sharply. "We go home with an army, sweet sister. With Khal Drogo's army. That is how we go home. And you must wed him and bed him for that, you will." He smiled at her. "I'd let his whole Khalasar fuck you if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men and their horses, too. If that's what it took to get my army. Be grateful it is only Drogo. In time, you may even learn to like him. Now dry your eyes. Illyrio is bringing him over, and he will not see you crying." Dany turned and saw that it was true. Magister Illyrio, all smiles and bows, was escorting Khal Drogo over to where they stood. She brushed away unfallen tears with the back of her hand. "Smile," Viserys whispered nervously, his hand falling to the hilt of his sword. "Go and stand up straight. Let him see that you have breasts. God, no, you have little enough as is." Daenerys smiled and stood up straight. It's a lot. It's quite dark. Okay. This is getting long. That was page 38. Let's do one more chapter, I'm thinking. We'll do one more chapter. It's obviously not going to have as many hard to pronounce names. It should be a little easier for me. Seeing as it's not a Daenerys chapter. And Daenerys has to talk about Kothor. Why you gotta talk about Kothor, girl? And Aurochs and Dothraki and Vice Dothrak and the Tyroshi and Magisters and whatever. A lot of big words. Kind of hard to, you make a lot of tongue twisters, George R. R. Martin, I'll tell you that much. Okay. Last one. Let's do this. Chapter 4. Eddard. The visitors poured through the castle gates in a river of gold and silver and polished steel. 300 strong, a pride of bannermen and knights, of sworn swords and free riders. Over their heads 12 golden banners whipped back and forth in the northern wind, emblazoned with the crowned stag of Baratheon. Ned knew many of the riders. There came Sir Jaime Lannister with hair as bright as beaten gold, and there Sandor Clegane with his terrible burned face. The tall boy beside him could only be the crown prince, and that stunted little man behind them was surely the imp Tyrion Lannister. Yet the huge man at the head of the column, flanked by 2 knights in the snow-white cloaks of the King's Guard, seemed almost a stranger to Ned, until he vaulted off the back of his war horse with a familiar roar and crushed him in a bone-crunching hug. "Ned, but it is good to see that frozen face of yours." The king looked him over top to bottom and laughed. "You have not changed at all." Would that Ned had been able to say the same. 15 years passed when they had ridden forth to win a throne. The Lord of Storm's End had been clean-shaven, clear-eyed, and muscled like a maiden's fantasy. 6.5 feet tall, he towered over the lesser men, and when he donned his armor and his great antlered helmet of his house, he became a veritable giant. He'd had a giant strength, too, his weapon of choice, a spiked iron war hammer that Ned could scarcely lift. In those days, the smell of leather and blood had clung to him like perfume. Now it was perfume that clung to him like perfume, and he had a girth to match his height. Ned had last seen the king 9 years before, during Balon Greyjoy's rebellion, when the stag and the direwolf had joined to end the pretensions of the self-proclaimed king of the Iron Islands. Since the night they had stood side by side in Greyjoy's fallen stronghold, where Robert had accepted the rebel lord's surrender, and Ned had taken his son Theon as hostage and ward, the king had gained at least 8 stone. A beard as coarse and black as iron wire covered his jaw to hide his double chin and the sag of his royal jowls, but nothing could hide his stomach or the dark circles under his eyes. Yet Robert was Ned's king now, and not just a friend, so he said only, "Your Grace, Winterfell is yours." By then the others were dismounting as well, and grooms were coming forward for their mounts. Robert's queen, Cersei Lannister, entered on foot with her younger children. The wheelhouse in which they had ridden, a huge double-decked carriage of oiled oak and gilded metal pulled by 40 heavy draft horses, was too wide to pull through the castle gate. Ned knelt in the snow to kiss the queen's ring, while Robert embraced Catelyn like a long-lost sister. Then the children had been brought forward, introduced, and approved of by both sides. No sooner had those formalities of greeting been completed than the king said to his host, "Take me down to your crypt, Eddard. I would pay my respects." Ned loved him for that, for remembering her still after all these years. He called for a lantern. No other words were needed. The queen had begun to protest. They had been riding since dawn. Everyone was tired and cold. Surely they should refresh themselves first. The dead would wait. She had said no more than that. Robert had looked at her, and her twin brother Jaime had taken her quietly by the arm, and she had said no more. They went down to the crypt together, Ned and this king he scarcely recognized. The winding stone steps were narrow. Ned went first with the lantern. "I'm starting to think we would never reach Winterfell," Robert complained as they descended. "In the south, the way they talk about my 7 kingdoms, a man forgets that your part is as big as the other 6 combined." "I trust you enjoyed your journey, Your Grace?" Robert snorted. "Bogs and forests and fields, and scarcely a decent inn north of the neck. I've never seen such a vast emptiness. Where are all your people?" "Likely they were too shy to come out," Ned jested. He could feel the chill coming up the stairs, a cold breath from deep within the earth. "Kings are a rare sight in the north." Robert snorted. "More likely they were hiding under the snow. Snow, Ned!" The king put one hand on the walls to steady himself as they descended. "Late summer snows are common enough," Ned said. "I hope they did not trouble you. They are usually mild." "The others take your mild snows," Robert swore. "What will this place be like in winter? I shudder to think." "The winters are always hard," Ned admitted, "but the Starks will endure. We always have." "You need to come south," Robert told him. "You need a taste of summer before it flees. In Highgarden there are fields of golden roses that stretch away as far as the eye can see. The fruits are so ripe they explode in your mouth. Melons, peaches, fire plums. You've never tasted such sweetness. You'll see, I brought you some. Even at Storm's End, with that good wind off the bay, the days are so hot you can barely move. And you ought to see the towns, Ned. Flowers everywhere, and the markets bursting with wood. The summer wine so cheap and so good that you can get drunk just breathing the air. Everyone is fat and drunk and rich. He laughed and slapped his own ample stomach a thump. And the girls, Ned, he exclaimed, his eyes sparkling. I swear, women lose all their modesty in the heat. They swim naked in the rivers right beneath the castle. Even in the streets, it's too damn hot for wool or fur. So they go around in these short gowns, silk as if they have the silver and cotton if not. But it's all the same when they start sweating and the cloth sticks to their skin. They might as well be naked. The king laughed happily. Robert Baratheon had always been a man of huge appetites, a man who knew how to take his pleasures. That it was not a charge anyone could lay at the door of Eddard Stark. Yet Ned could not help but notice that those pleasures were taking a toll on the king. Robert was breathing heavily by the time they reached the bottom of the stairs, his face red in the lantern light as they stepped out into the darkness of the crypt. Your Grace, Ned said respectfully. He swept the lantern in a wide semicircle. Shadows moved and lurched. Flickering light touched the stones underfoot and brushed against a long procession of granite pillars that marched ahead 2 by 2 into the dark. Between the pillars, the dead sat on their stone thrones against the walls, backs against the sepulchres, I believe, that contained their mortal remains. She's down at the end, with Father and Brandon. He led the way between the pillars, and Robert followed wordlessly, shivering in the subterranean chill. It was always cold down here. Their footsteps rang off the stones and echoed in the vault overhead as they walked among the dead of House Stark. The lords of Winterfell watched them pass. Their likeness were carved into the stones that sealed the tombs. In long rows they sat, blind eyes staring out into the eternal darkness, while great stone direwolves curled round their feet. The shifting shadows made by the stone figures seemed to stir as the living passed by. By ancient custom, an iron longsword had been laid across the lap of each who had been Lord of Winterfell, to keep the vengeful spirits in their crypts. The oldest had long ago rusted away to nothing, leaving only a few red stains where the metal had rested on stone. Ned wondered if that meant those ghosts were free to roam the castle now. He hoped not. The first lords of Winterfell had been men hard as the land they ruled. In the centuries before the Dragon Lords came over the sea, they had sworn allegiance to no man, styling themselves the kings in the north. Ned stopped at last and lifted the oil lantern. The crypt continued on into the darkness ahead of them, but beyond this point the tombs were empty and unsealed, black holes waiting for their dead, waiting for him and his children. Ned did not like to think on that. Here, he told his king. Robert nodded silently, knelt and bowed his head. There were 3 tombs, side by side. Lord Rickard Stark, Ned's father, had a long, stern face. The stonemason had known him well. He sat with quiet dignity, stone fingers holding tight to the sword across his lap, but in life all swords had failed him. In 2 smaller sepulchres on either side were his children. Brandon had been 20 when he died, strangled by the order of the Mad King Aerys Targaryen only a few short days before he was to wed Catelyn Tully of Riverrun. His father had been forced to watch him die. He was the true heir, the eldest, born to rule. Lyanna had only been 16, a child woman of surpassing loveliness. Ned had loved her with all his heart. Robert had loved her even more. She was to have been his bride. She was more beautiful than that, the king said after a silence. His eyes lingered on Lyanna's face as if he could will her back to life. Finally he rose, made awkward by his weight. Ah, damn it, Ned, did you have to bury her in a place like this? His voice was hoarse with remembered grief. She deserved more than darkness. She was a Stark of Winterfell, Ned said quietly. This is her place. She should be on a hill somewhere under a fruit tree, with the sun and clouds above her and the rain to wash her clean. I was with her when she died, Ned reminded the king. She wanted to come home, to rest beside Brandon and father. He could still hear her sometimes. Promise me, she had cried, in a room that smelled of blood and roses. Promise me, Ned. The fever had taken her strength, and her voice had been faint as a whisper. But when he gave her his word, the fear had gone out of his sister's eyes. Ned remembered the way she had smiled then, how tightly her fingers had clutched his as she gave up on her hold on life. The rose petals spilling from her palm, dead and black. After that he remembered nothing. They had found him still holding her body, silent with grief. The little Crannog man, Howland Reed, had taken her hand from his. Ned could recall none of it. I bring her flowers when I can, he said. Lyanna was fond of flowers. The king touched her cheek, his fingers brushing across the rough stone as gently as if it were living flesh. I vowed to kill Rhaegar for what he did to her. You did? Ned reminded him. Only once, Robert said bitterly. They had come together at the ford of the Trident while the battle crashed around them. Robert with his war hammer and his great antlered helm, the Targaryen three-headed dragon of his house. Oh, oops. Wait, I'm going to start that paragraph from the top. They had come together at the ford of the Trident while the battle crashed around them. Robert with his war hammer and his great antlered helm, the Targaryen prince armored all in black. On his breastplate was the three-headed dragon of his house, wrought all in rubies that flashed like fire in the sunlight. The waters of the Trident ran red around the hooves of their destriers as they circled and clashed again and again, until at last a crushing blow from Robert's hammer stove in the dragon and the chest beneath it. When Ned had finally come on the scene, Rhaegar lay dead in the stream, while men of both armies scrabbled in the swirling waters for rubies knocked free of his armor. In my dreams I kill him every night, Robert admitted. 1,000 deaths will still be less than he deserves. There was nothing Ned could say to that. After a quiet, he said, We should return, your grace. Your wife will be waiting. The others take my wife, Robert muttered sourly, but he started back the way they had come, his footsteps falling heavily. And if I hear your grace once more, I'll have your head on a spike. We are more to each other than that. I had not forgotten, Ned replied quietly. When the king did not answer, he said, Tell me about Jon. Robert shook his head. I have never seen a man sicken so quickly. We gave a tourney on my son's name day. If you had seen Jon then, you would have sworn he would live forever. A fortnight later, he was dead. The sickness was like a fire in his gut. It burned right through him. He paused beside a pillar, before the tomb of a long-dead Stark. I loved that old man. We both did. Ned paused a moment. Catelyn fears for her sister. How does Lysa bear her grief? Robert's mouth gave a bitter twist. Not well, in truth, he admitted. I think losing Jon has driven the woman mad, Ned. She has taken the boy back to the Eyrie, against my wishes. I'd hoped to foster him with Tywin Lannister at Casterly Rock. Jon had no brothers, no other sons. Was I supposed to leave him to be raised by women? Messed up, by the way. What the hell, Robert? Ned would sooner entrust a child to a pit viper than to Lord Tywin, but he left his doubts unspoken. Some old wounds never truly healed and bleed again at the slightest word. The wife has lost the husband, he said carefully. Perhaps the mother feared to lose the son. The boy is very young. 6 and sickly. The Lord of the Eyrie gods have mercy, the king swore. Lord Tywin would have never taken a ward before. Lord Tywin had never taken a ward before. Lysa ought to have been honored. The Lannisters are a great and noble house. She refused to even hear of it. Then she left in the dead of night without so much as a by your leave. Cersei was furious. He sighed deeply. The boy is my namesake. Did you know that? Robert Arryn. I'm sworn to protect him. How can I do that if his mother steals him away? I will take him as ward if you wish, Ned said. Lysa should consent to that. She and Catelyn were close as girls, and she would be welcome here as well. Generous offer, my friend, the king said, but too late. Lord Tywin has already given his consent. Fostering the boy elsewhere would be a grievous affront to him. I have more concern for my nephew's welfare than I do for Lannister pride, Ned declared. That is because you do not sleep with a Lannister, Robert laughed, the sound rattling among the tombs and bouncing from the vaulted ceiling. His smile was a flash of white teeth in the thicket of a huge black beard. Ah, Ned, he said, you are still too serious. He put a massive arm around Ned's shoulders. I'd planned to wait a few more days to speak to you, but I see there's no need for it. Come, walk with me. They started back down between the pillars. Blind stone eyes seemed to follow them as they passed. The king kept his arm around Ned's shoulder. You must have wondered why I finally came north to Winterfell after so long. Ned had his suspicions, but he did not give them voice. For the joy of my company, surely, he said lightly. And there is the wall. You need to see it, your grace, to walk along its battlements and talk to to those who man it. The Night's Watch is a shadow of what it once was. Benjen says, no doubt I will hear what your brother says soon enough, Robert said. The wall has stood for, 8,000 years? It can keep a few days more. I have more pressing concerns. These are difficult times. I need good men about me. Men like Lord Arryn. He served as Lord of the Eyrie, as Warden of the East, as the hand of the king. He will not be easy to replace. His son, Ned began. His son will succeed to the Eyrie and all its incomes, Robert said brusquely. No more. That took Ned by surprise. He stopped, startled, and turned to look at his king. The words came unbidden. The Arryns have always been wardens of the East. The title goes with the domain. Perhaps when he comes of age, the honor can be restored to him, Robert said. I have this year to think of and the next. A 6-year-old boy is no war leader, Ned. In peace, the title is only an honor. Let the boy keep it, for his father's sake, if not his own. Surely you owe Jon that much for his service. The king was not pleased. He took his arm from around Ned's shoulders. Jon's service was the duty he owed his liege lord. I'm not ungrateful, Ned. You of all men ought to know that. But the son is not his father. A mere boy cannot hold the East. Then his tone softened. Enough of this. There's a more important office to discuss, and I would not argue with you. Robert grasped Ned by the elbow. I have need of you, Ned. I am yours to command, your grace. Always. They were words he had to say, and so he said them, apprehensive about what might come next. Robert scarcely seemed to hear him. Those years we spent in the Eyrie, God, those were good years. I want you at my side again, Ned. I want you down in King's Landing, not up here at the end of the world where you're no damned use to anybody. Robert looked off into the darkness, for a moment as melancholy as a start. I swear to you, sitting a throne is 1,000 times harder than winning one. Laws are a tedious business, and counting coppers is worse. And the people, there's no end of them. I sit on that damnable iron chair and listen to them complain until my mind is numb and my ass is raw. They all want something, money or land or justice. The lies they tell, and my lords and ladies are no better. I am surrounded by flatterers and fools. It can drive a man to madness, Ned. Half of them don't dare tell me the truth, and the other half can't find it. There are nights I wish we had lost at the Trident. No, not truly, but I understand, Ned said softly. Robert looked at him. I think you do. If so, you are the only one, my old friend. He smiled. Lord Eddard Stark, I would name you the Hand of the King. Ned dropped to one knee. The offer did not surprise him. What other reason could Robert have had for coming so far? The hand of the king was the second most powerful man in the 7 kingdoms. He spoke with the king's voice, commanded the king's armies, drafted the king's laws. At times he even sat upon the iron throne to dispense king's justice when the king was absent or sick or otherwise indisposed. Robert was offering him a responsibility as large as the realm itself. It was the last thing in the world he wanted. "Your Grace," he said, "I'm not worthy of the honor." Robert groaned with good-humored impatience. "If I wanted to honor you, I'd let you retire. I'm planning to make you run the kingdom and fight the wars while I eat and drink and wench myself into an early grave." He slapped his gut and grinned. "You know the saying about the king in the hand." Ned knew the saying. "What the king dreams," he said, "the hand builds." "I betted a fisherman once who told me the lowborn had a choicer way to put it. The king eats, they say, and the hand takes the shit." He threw his head back and roared in laughter. The echoes rang through the darkness, and all around them the dead of Winterfell seemed to watch with cold and disapproving eyes. Finally, the laughter dwindled and stopped. Ned was still on one knee, his eyes upraised. "Damn it, Ned," the king complained. "You might at least humor me with a smile. They say it grows so cold up here in winter that a man's laughter freezes in his throat and chokes him to death," Ned said evenly. "Perhaps that is why the Starks have so little humor." "Come south with me and I'll teach you how to laugh again," the king promised. "You helped me win this damnable throne. Now help me hold it. We were meant to rule together. If Lyanna had lived, we would have been brothers, bound by blood as well as affection. Well, it is not too late. I have a son. You have a daughter. My Joff and your Sansa shall join our houses as Lyanna and I might once have done." This offer did surprise him. "Sansa's only 11. Robert waved an impatient hand. "Old enough for betrothal? The marriage can wait a few years." The king smiled. "Now stand up and say yes, curse you." "Nothing would give me greater pleasure, your honor," Ned answered. He hesitated. "These honors are also unexpected. May I have some time to consider? I need to tell my wife." Yes, of course, tell Catelyn. Sleep on it if you must." The king reached down, clasped Ned by the hand, and pulled him roughly to his feet. "Just don't keep me waiting too long. I am not the most patient of men." For a moment, Eddard Stark was filled with a terrible sense of foreboding. This was his place, here in the north. He looked at the stone figures all around them, breathed deep in the chill silence of the crypt. He could feel the eyes of the dead. They were all listening, he knew, and winter was coming. That's actually a pretty incredible place to stop, I think. The next chapter is a Jon chapter, which is awfully exciting for me, and makes me kind of want to keep going, but I know I shouldn't, and I know that I can't. I've already been reading for like 2 hours. I'm wasting my entire night, but yeah, so this was recorded with a person in mind who I'm going to send it to if I gain the courage to actually post it. And hey, if you're listening, you know who you are, and I hope you enjoyed. And if it wasn't you, if it's Juno, I'm talking to Juno. Juno, if you hated it, I'm sorry, and I'll never post another one again. But if you do want to hear chapter 5, just text me and let me know, and maybe I'll do this again. And for anyone else in the world that might have found this, you should really read them. You should really read the books. And if I keep doing this, then feel free to listen to my rendition of them. I don't know.